This is Al Jazeera.
Hello there, I'm Nick Clark. This is the Newshour live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes. A fire kills at least 82 people in a Baghdad hospital. The Prime Minister has sacked a number of officials. In a week that's seen people desperate for medical help, India's Prime Minister admits this second wave of COVID-19 has shaken the nation. More violence overnight around the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in East Jerusalem. Israeli forces fire stun grenades to disperse crowds of Palestinians. And Al Jazeera goes on the high seas in the Gulf of Guinea, one of the most dangerous places for pirate attacks.
And in sport, English football has announced a unified boycott of social media. All players and teams are backing the effort to fight back against online abuse.
So let's begin in Iraq, where at least 82 people have been killed after an explosion inside a Baghdad hospital. The resulting fire spread through a ward where COVID-19 patients were being treated. Earlier reports point to an oxygen tank being the cause of the initial blast.
In the beginning, there was an explosion. It started from there. The second explosion was over there. The fire spread like fuel. The smoke reached my brother. My brother's sick. I took him out into the street next to the checkpoint. Then I came back and went up from there to the last floor. That didn't burn. I found a girl suffocating, about 19 years old. She was suffocating, about to die.
Let's cross straight away to Simona Fulton, who's live for us in Baghdad. And Simona, devastating blaze. What more do we know?
Well, the death toll has been rapidly rising since this morning as the bodies, many of them heavily charred, are being identified. But of course, also many people would have in the meantime passed away due to heavy injuries sustained as a result of the fire, but also from what we understand from doctors as a result of being transported. Because let's remember, this is a COVID-19 ward. Many of the patients who were there, they entirely depend on ventilators, on oxygen supply. And the process of being moved from this hospital, even if they survived the fire, to another one, that was another risk factor that likely took the lives of many people. Now, the reason why this death toll is going up so rapidly is also because there were a lot of family members present in the ward. There were 120 patients, but for each patient, we understand there could be as many as 5 or 6 relatives present in the room to support the patient, to, for example, assist health staff with tasks like putting on oxygen masks, like taking them to the bathroom, for example. And we spoke to one survivor from the blast who was caring for an elderly family member when the fire broke out. And he told us that there's no restrictions whatsoever on the entry into the hospital by relatives, that there could be 5 to 6 relatives per patient. And despite this being, of course, a COVID-19 ward with a highly infectious disease, there was no effort on the part of authorities to restrict the number of people inside this ward. So the casualties that we're seeing now are both from among the patients as well as the relatives. And the whole story, from what we're understanding, is really a testament to the poor state of the healthcare sector in Iraq. We understand that there were no proper supplies, that relatives were asked to aid health staff because of the shortages, and that's why there have been loud calls for resignations of top officials. Of course, Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi has already suspended the director of the hospital, also the director responsible for healthcare in the area. But what people are really asking for is the resignation of the health minister himself. But he comes from a very powerful party, that of Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, which won the elections last time. So many people feel that there will not be accountability at the level that would be required.
Simona, we'll leave it there for the moment. Simona Fulton there in Baghdad. Let's speak now to Ali Al-Bayati, who's a member of the Iraqi High Commission for Human Rights, joins us now, also from Baghdad. Mr. Bayati, horrifying scenes that we're seeing at this hospital, and the numbers of dead just keep on rising.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Of course, our condolence for families of the victims in Ibn al-Khatib hospital. What happened, of course, is a disaster. when somebody coming to the hospital or attending or intending to get treatment from the hospital and is getting out killed or dead. We know very well that there is absence of occupational safety requirements, absence of confronting such fire in such buildings. When we look at on the official reports about such entity, we see there is no auto extinguishing system or firefighting system. There is no early alert system. There is no real external ladders for people to get out in such fires. So at the end, it is a governmental neglect, and accountability is requested. And I hope it will not pass like the previous accidents in which we lost tens of patients. We are transferring actually from a situation of killing of the patients from outside at the outside of the hospital in the inside of the hospital,
Right.
which is, as we explained it, is a place for getting treatment, not to be killed.
You talk of neglect. How and why has this been allowed to happen?
Yeah, I told you we have official reports clarifying the absence of occupational safety requirements, including auto extinguishing system, having enough trained committees for civil defense procedures, absence of external ladders, as well as at least absence of enough number of manual extinguishing instruments. All these are indicators of neglect, and even when we look at on the videos published, we can see that the patients and their relatives facing the disaster alone without any official response. And I think till now, people and somebody's from outside official institution helping to get the killed or the people outside of the hospital to save them.
What's your view about this promise of an investigation then from the government? Is that going to lead to anything?
I hope that it will not be like the previous one. It will not last years without any real result. I hope that there will be a step for real accountability of the responsible figures and persons in such important and vital institution. We are dealing with a humanitarian institution, which is a Ministry of Health. The ministry neglected for decades, and I think it is a time for the government to give real attention for that. I think it is the responsibility of Prime Minister to rule such ministry to solve the deep problems in such ministry, including corruption, including neglects, including absence of real health system in it.
Mr. Al-Bayati, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Welcome.
Now, India is reporting a record number of coronavirus cases for a fourth straight day, with nearly 350,000 infections. Staff at overwhelmed hospitals are begging for oxygen supplies. A lockdown across Delhi has been extended for another week. The United States has expressed deep concern about the situation and plans to urgently deploy additional support. China, Russia, and the European Union, they've all already offered help with oxygen-generating equipment. Let's cross straight away to Liz Paranam, who joins us now from New Delhi. And Liz, so you're outside Delhi's biggest hospital, I understand. What's the scene like there?
Hello, Nick. Well, it is a terrible situation here. We are outside New Delhi's biggest public hospital, where the capacity is 1,500 beds. But we've been told by the hospital that they have 1,850 patients. Many are sharing beds and others are on the hospital floor. That is why we are seeing other patients lying outside the hospital on the footpath with their family members begging hospital staff to admit their loved ones. There are incredibly tense scenes here. because those family members have already tried to get their loved ones admitted to other hospitals, but all hospitals in Delhi right now, in the capital, which has some of the best healthcare infrastructure in the country, are completely full. And we're starting to hear about this happening in other cities too. Over the past few days, we had a number of people, at least 45 people, die in Delhi after their oxygen supply ran out. There is a critical shortage of oxygen in many states.
OK, we've lost our connection there with Liz Brown. I'm talking about the difficult situation there in New Delhi. We'll get her back just as soon as we can. All right, well, Javed Ansari is an Indian journalist. He says the outbreak has been mishandled and things will get worse in the coming days.
Every day there are protests. There's tremendous amount of anger and despair. And the frightening part is that the worst is yet to come. A government panel, an expert panel set up by the government, has predicted that the surge, the peak, will come a month from now, when numbers could go as high as 500,000 daily. As it is, 20 people died for want of oxygen in a Delhi hospital last night. And every day, by the hour, the cries go out. The hospitals are rushing to the courts, petitioning them, saying that we are only minutes away from our oxygen supplies running out. And therefore, India has a mountain to climb. We are up against it. The government also appears to be reluctant, partly because our Prime Minister and the government wanted the world to believe that India, being the hub of the pharma industry, was leading this fight against the pandemic. They lulled themselves, convinced themselves into believing that India had got the better of this pandemic. The time that could have been used to augment health infrastructure was wasted. We grew complacent. There were political rallies where hundreds and thousands of people gathered and were addressed by senior politicians, especially the Prime Minister and the Home Minister. Religious congregations where, again, hundreds and thousands of people were allowed to gather. So COVID behavior was thrown out of the winds, and as a result of which, we now have this situation which has exploded in our face. And like I said earlier, the fear is that the worst is yet to come.
Plenty more still ahead on the News Hour, including urging pilgrims to go green, how one of Iraq's holy cities is trying to manage the waste left behind by millions of visitors every year. Why Armenia's Prime Minister is stepping down, leading to a snap election in June. Got sport coming up too. Rafael Nadal is one win away from a record-extending title victory in Barcelona. There's been a third night of violence near the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. Israeli security forces fired stun grenades and water cannon at Palestinian protesters. They're angry at restrictions on gatherings during the Muslim month of Ramadan. On Thursday, Israeli forces say they prevented far-right Israeli activists from confronting a group of Palestinians. Harry Fawcett has more now from West Jerusalem.
It's a pretty dangerous brew of factors which have fueled this so far and risk fueling it even further towards a bigger escalation involving other parts of the region. The question that started the protests, which have been going really since the beginning of Ramadan, the first night of Ramadan, is the issue of the steps outside Damascus Gate, one of the most famous entrances to the old city in occupied East Jerusalem, where after nightly prayers it is traditional for people to come and assemble and gather. This year the police have prevented that happening. They've put up barriers just allowing people to enter and leave without being able to congregate on the steps. So since the first night of Ramadan there have been these skirmishes and clashes. What's changed in the last few days has been this attempt by a group of several hundred, of a couple of hundred or more of far-right Israeli Jewish activists, anti-Arab, chanting racist death to Arab chants as they marched from West Jerusalem to confront the Palestinians at Damascus Gate. Israeli police said that they were going to prevent them from getting there. In the end, they got very close. There was criticism on the Thursday night, that they were more heavy-handed dealing with the Palestinian protesters than they were with the Israeli Jewish ones. and there were about 125 injuries on that night.
Rebels in northern Chad say they're ready to observe a ceasefire and discuss a political settlement. The Front for Change and Concord rebels crossed from Libya on April the 11th, calling for an end to President Idris Deby's rule. Deby was killed during fighting the group on the front line. According to the government, a military council headed by his son Mohammed will oversee an 18-month transition to elections. Let's bring in Hiba Morgan from Chad's capital of N'Djamena. So, Hiba, so rebels ready to put down their weapons. What's likely to happen now?
Well, first of all, we have to look at how many groups are involved in the fight against the Chadian government, which is now headed by Idris Deby's son, Mohammed Idris Deby. There is, of course, the Front for Change and Concord, which was responsible for the death of the country's longtime president, Idris Deby. And what they say is that they're ready to observe a ceasefire. That's not a complete announcement of a ceasefire yet. So there is likely to be a bit of fighting continuing. But it also comes off the back of an announcement from the group that on Friday, the day a state ceremony was held, a state funeral was held for Idris Deby, the group accused the government of bombarding their positions on the border, targeting their leader. Now, the military council, when they announced Idris Deby's death, announced that dialogue with all groups, not here in the capital in N'Djamena, but other groups were also outside the capital and outside the country, saying that they want to form an inclusive transitional government. So the announcement from the Front for Change and Concord group that they're ready to observe that ceasefire seems to be a response to the call by the Transitional Military Council for dialogue, but it's also not a complete recognition of the council. Opposition groups, including armed groups, have been saying that they want the military to step down and a transitional interim government to be put in its place that is led by civilians, or that should at least be formed with in agreement with most of the political parties, or all the political parties and civil society groups here in the country. So it looks like this announcement that the rebel group is ready to observe ceasefire is just a step forward, but it's not a complete announcement to a ceasefire, and it remains to be seen how many other rebel groups, especially armed groups, are ready to also lay down their weapons and negotiate with the Transitional Military Council.
Here, until now, how serious has the fighting been? What kind of impact has it been having?
It did cause some concern. The fighting along the border, along the northern border, did cause concern. We have seen people here in the capital in N'Djamena on the days of the days prior to the announcement of Idris Deby's death. We've seen people closing their stores. We've seen people panicking, and we've seen people packing up their belongings and trying to leave the capital, saying that they're looking for more safe places to go to, because they were concerned that the rebels will attack the capital. Because in N'Djamena, the capital has been attacked by rebels in 2006 and 2008. So there were concerns that the rebels this time will stick to their promise of attacking the capital. So there are concerns about how much power this group has, the Front for Change and Concord, especially because most of their armaments come from Libya, having a good stock of ammunition, which is raising concerns here. There are also other rebel groups that have announced their support for this Front for Change and Concord. And there are also other groups, Nick, that said that they do not recognize this military council, and that unless a civilian government is put in place, they will not observe a ceasefire, and they will continue fighting and heading to the capital. So lots of concerns about not just this armed groups, but the various other armed groups who are fighting Idris Deby's government and now seem keen to be fighting his son's government as well.
All right, Hiba, leave it there for now. Hiba Morgan there in N'Djamena. Thank you. Joe Biden has become the first US president to formally recognize the mass killing of Armenians during the Ottoman Empire as an act of genocide. Biden said his intention is not to cast blame, but to ensure it never happens again. Rob Reynolds is in Montebello in California and has this report.
A day of sorrow and remembrance at the Armenian Martyrs Memorial near Los Angeles. All day long, families came to pay their respects, laying flowers to commemorate the dead. But this was also a watershed day for Armenian Americans, as U.S. President Joe Biden officially declared the mass killing of Armenians under the Ottoman Empire during the First World War as genocide.
I think the whole Armenian community is saying really thank you for him to pronounce as a genocide. So we so appreciate it. That finally the justice is coming.
I'm so happy that President Biden made the statement today. And I wish my parents were alive to hear this and see this. My mother and her family did go through walking through the desert in Syria. They killed her father, my mother's father. My mother's youngest sister died.
Biden's statement said, "We remember the lives of all those who died in the Ottoman-era Armenian genocide and recommit ourselves to preventing such an atrocity from ever again recurring." Previous presidents avoided use of the term for fear of angering NATO ally Turkey. And indeed, Turkish officials lashed out, summoning the U.S. ambassador to lodge a protest, and Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu declaring, "Words can't change history. We won't take any lessons about our own history from anyone." Turkey has fiercely denied the mass killings of 1,500,000 Armenian men, women, and children was an act of genocide, saying the deaths were the result of warfare. In Istanbul, many people rejected the genocide label.
No such thing ever happened. During a war, things happen on both sides, so it's meaningless to describe it like that.
Our relationship with the U.S. is already really bad, and this will only worsen it.
U.S.-Turkey relations have frayed in recent months. As a candidate, Biden declared the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan as an autocrat, and his administration has pressed Ankara to stop human rights abuses. In the Armenian capital, Yerevan, people marched and cheered, and the country's leaders applauded Biden's statement. Many Armenian Americans here say the terrible events of more than a century ago are like a festering wound that never heals, no matter how many decades have passed.
We grow up, with the stories that have been passed down from survivors. The story of survival. So much trauma, and it's multi-generational trauma.
But some say for them, the president's words have shifted something.
A sense of relief because it's out in the open. It's been acknowledged by Biden.
Now, perhaps, there can be some measure of healing. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Montebello, California.
Well, let's hear now from Arsen Karyatian, who's a former foreign affairs advisor to the Armenian Prime Minister and founder of Alik Media. He says Biden's recognition of the word genocide is significant because it has an effect on U.S. policy.
It's important because once you use the word, it becomes a legal and politically binding process, which means that there should be responsibility carried out because of that. That's why Turkey is more afraid of the word than anyone else. So they're ready to hear anything. They're ready to accept the deportations, which are factually based by the Ottoman archives, but they're afraid of the word genocide because that will mean very clear ramifications for the Turkish state.
Well, use of the word is rejected by many in Turkey. Former presidential spokesman Ibrahim Kalin says it's without any legal or historic basis.
Unfortunately, some of these parliaments and governments have chosen to accept this Armenian propaganda of the killing of Armenians in 1915. Historical facts are out there. What is presented as a case for genocide has no historical basis, has no legal basis. In fact, to call anything a genocide, you need an international court established particularly for that purpose. This is the case with Srebrenica and Rwanda.
Let's go live now to Resul Serdar, who's in Istanbul. And Resul, what further response, what further reaction are we likely to see from Turkey on this?
Well, Nick, I don't think that Turkey will further escalate the tension, the crisis between two countries regarding, given the fact that the importance of the relations with the U.S. is quite critical for the country. So far, there has been lots of public condemnations coming from all the different parts of the Turkish politics, domestic politics, the opposition parties, NGOs, the governing parties, and so on. And also, Ankara has summoned the USA's ambassador to Ankara to the foreign ministry and conveyed Turkey a strong reaction to the American ambassador. But so far we have not seen any concrete retaliatory actions taken by Turkey against the USA. And Turkish ambassador in Washington even has not been summoned, has not been withdrawn for the consultation to Ankara. And so far, we didn't see any restrictions over the Incirlik Air Base regarding the USA's entrance. And also, USA has not been barred from the Incirlik Air Base, which is one of the largest air bases in the MENA region used by the USA. And I think the Turkey is from now on also going to take very measured actions. Just as a journalist who has been following the Turkish-American relations over the years, have seen the Turkish-American relations have gone through ups and downs several times, but each time they could manage somehow to survive. These two countries, since '52, have been the two largest NATO allies. And you can see when there is a convergence of the politics regarding the security, they become great allies. But when there is a divergence of the politics regarding security, the hostility starts to dominate the environment between these two countries. So now, just at the Eastern Europe, you can see the escalation between Ukraine and Russia. In the Black Sea, the escalation is going on. In Mediterranean Sea, these two countries are there. In Syria, and particularly in the transitional period in Afghanistan, regarding the cooperation between Turkey and the USA, and that Turkey is going to be the mediator between the parties regarding the peace process of Afghanistan. You can see that the cooperation of these two countries is not just between Ankara and Washington, but it is almost a global cooperation. Okay. So a NATO with such a crisis most probably will not be a functioning one. I think Turkey will not take any action that will burn the bridge with the USA, and USA is not going to give up on Ankara.
Russell, appreciate that. Thanks very much indeed, Russell Sadar there. Thank you. Well, a day after that designation by President Biden, Armenia's Prime Minister has resigned, setting the stage for snap elections on June the 20th. Nikol Pashinyan had been under pressure for his handling of last year's war with Azerbaijan. And the conflict ended with Armenia giving up control of several disputed territories. Let's speak to Robin Forestier-Walker, our correspondent. He's in Tbilisi in neighbouring Georgia. So, Robin, this was always coming, wasn't it? But what about the timing given Biden's announcement?
Yeah, the timing's interesting. We don't know, of course, whether Nikol Pashinyan always intended to use this date. Today is another public holiday. But I think certainly the Biden statement will have buoyed him, given the intense pressure that he's been under these recent months since the war over Nagorno-Karabakh, which really has been the reason why this has all been happening, because the opposition, his opponents, have been calling for his resignation for many months now. In fact, almost daily protests, because they hold him responsible for the outcome of that war, in which Armenia lost huge swathes of territory surrounding the Nagorno-Karabakh enclave. And therefore, Mr. Pashinyan, in fact, said himself that everybody has weighed in on those days and has had an opinion to say about it, with the exception of the Armenian electorate. And so this is their opportunity to have their say, almost like a referendum, since those, as he described it, the catastrophic events of the war back last year. What's also worth pointing out, however, is that the opposition never really wanted to have early elections, because I think they understood that even though Nikol Pashinyan is unpopular, they may be even less popular than he is, because the opposition is made up of the former government that he brought down in a popular revolution back in 2018. So it was never their hope to have early elections. They wanted a caretaker administration. He now, I think, has his sights set on June the 20th as a referendum on him, which he believes he's going to be able to win.
All right, Robin, thanks for that. Robin Forestier-Walker there. Thank you. Still ahead here on Al Jazeera, a new virus found in bats has researchers urging people to get the COVID-19 vaccine. And it's the biggest night in Hollywood, but find out why people in Hong Kong won't be able to watch this year's Academy Awards. And in sport, a rare defeat for football's world champions delays their league title celebrations.